Hello and welcome back. This lesson will be on how to theme your classes with philosophy. Early in my yoga practice, I was fortunate enough to have access to some teachers that were really able to bring a new dimension to the classes that I attended with their use of storytelling and intertwining the theme of the class with larger concepts of the philosophy of yoga. Yet at the same time, I was somewhat dismayed because I felt like I would never be able to teach at that level with the same amount of information that these teachers that I admired so much were able to bring to their classes. And it actually took quite a while before I began to feel more comfortable and confident teaching in that way with introducing more philosophy to my classes. And it wasn't until I went and took a 300-hour training and taught hundreds and hundreds of classes before I started to develop that kind of confidence. And my goal with this lesson today is to help you get to that point much faster in your teaching process. So hopefully I can reveal to you a system to follow and some insights that will allow you to teach philosophy with your classes at a much quicker, a much sooner pace than what it took me to get there. What I have here is a theme building formula. Now, I won't take credit for inventing this. This was taught to me, and I've seen other teachers using a similar formula. And I think it has its roots perhaps in Anusara yoga, because both those teachers that I've witnessed teaching this method came from that tradition. But it's a formula that I've been using for years, and I think it's going to help you as well. The formula has four main aspects. Aspect one is to summarize, which is get the basic point across without a lot of time-consuming details. Aspect two is universalize. Tie the theme into the larger teachings of yoga. Aspect three is personalize. Make the theme easy to relate to and relevant. And aspect four is physicalize. Connect the theme to the asana and to the experience. And now the order of these things is 100% interchangeable. It is not necessary to have all four aspects in every theme in every class. You can choose one of them or two of them or three of them or four of them, but don't feel that you have to include everything all at once. And in just a bit, I'll be going through each one separately to show you how you would go about introducing these into your classes and what specifically each one is. Now, in order to add some context to the aspects of this theme building formula, I'm going to use Hanuman as an example. Hanuman, or Hanumanasana rather, is a challenging pose, to say the least, and it can be difficult to teach, particularly when students' bodies are not quite ready to open up into the pose. But the character of Hanuman himself is a vastly interesting figure, and using him or this pose as a point of reference, I think will allow me to elaborate on this formula in a way that kind of makes sense. We'll have a visual reference to draw upon as I go over each aspect and explain how you would introduce these themes into your classes. As you learn about Hanuman through his stories, you will recognize that he embodies several different qualities. One of these qualities is the aspect or quality of perseverance. He overcomes insurmountable difficulties in his quest to help Rama to find his wife Sita. And another quality that Hanuman embodies is that of dedication and of devotion. He has so dedicated such a major part of his youth of his life to helping Rama and Sita that he exemplifies these qualities. You get to witness what it's like to be dedicated and devoted. And it takes these qualities to practice Hanumanasana, the pose, and you learn these qualities through the practice of the pose as well. And before you even have to ask me the question, but Johnny, how are we supposed to know that Hanuman embodies these qualities? How are we supposed to know the story of Hanuman? I'll have to give you some warning that you'll have to read about Hanuman. Now, if you will recall from your 200-hour teacher training, I'm sure that your teacher or teachers probably gave you a whole list of books and references to read to enrich your knowledge of the philosophy and the history of yoga. And at some point in your teaching career, you're going to have to actually pull those books out of whatever dusty library you've placed them in and actually read them. For the purpose of Hanuman, I'll recommend Ramayana, and this particular edition has been written by Krishna Dharma. This is India's immortal tale of adventure, love, and wisdom. It tells the story of Rama, Sita, Rama's brother, Lakshmana, Hanuman, and many, many more characters. There are descendants of the great eagle Garuda and a whole bunch of characters in this story. And I'll place a link for this in the lesson page for you to go and look for it on Amazon if you wish to. What I like about this particular edition or this translation of the story of the book is that it is told in a modern style. So if you've ever seen the movie trilogy Lord of the Rings with the epic battles of the goblins and the trolls and the humans and all of these other creatures, Ramayana is sort of similar to that because it's this tale of adventure. It's a tale of a lost princess. It's a tale of demons and magical creatures and heroic adventures and tales of morality and virtue. And all of these combined into a fantastic tale, a fantastic story. It's relatively easy to read, and you will learn all about Hanuman in the process. Let's now get into the details of the theme building formula. So the first aspect, summarize. This is possibly something that a great many of you are already doing within your classes. Now, the idea here is to get the basic point across without a lot of time-consuming details. And this is doing things such as setting intentions before class. That's an easy way to begin to incorporate philosophy, and it allows you to provide something more for your students to think about. You know, this doesn't have to be very complicated. It's just something that you might offer as you set the opening of the class, as you bring the students into focus. You might just ask them to think about something important to them today, to set an intention. But it doesn't have to be so open-ended. You can set the intention for them, particularly if you are theming your class around something such as Hanuman. Another way you could go about this is to read a quote, passage, or a poem. You can share something yogic, philosophical, or spiritual that has moved or inspired you. You can share this with your students similarly to just setting an intention or allowing an intention to be set. Also, you can place this at the end of class. Once the asana has settled down, before you place your students into Shavasana, maybe you offer a final consideration, a nugget of wisdom, something for the students to process, to consider and think about before they drift off into the twilight of their practice. Now, it will take some practice to begin interjecting these stories, these themes, to doing something different than simply teaching poses. You will probably consider before class exactly where you want to drop these summaries, how you want to include your themes, and then come prepared to class to offer these things in a very similar way that you would come with your sequence already prepared. So you will enter class knowing exactly when the ideal time is for you to begin relaying this additional information. With practice, as you become more comfortable interjecting ideas, interjecting these philosophies, you can begin to build upon the summary. As you move into the universalize aspect, you can start to introduce bigger concepts or more ideas into the web, into the theme of the class. One way to universalize the theme is to relate the theme to our dreams and to our goals. So our ideal life doesn't happen overnight, but like Hanumanasana, takes consistent dedication to achieve. Right? You didn't just wake up one day and decide that you were going to be a yoga teacher, or that you were going to get through university, or that you were going to do whatever it is that you've decided to do. But it took a lot of sincere dedication. It took action on your half to get from point A to point B. So just as it takes a lot of effort in our lives to make our ideal lives possible, a pose like Hanumanasana can potentially require a lot of dedication and practice for a great many of your students. You can relate the theme to our relationships. It takes perseverance and patience to understand what we need and what we can offer in a relationship. From personal experience, I can tell you that it took me a great many relationships to know both the type of partner that I wanted to be in the relationship, as well as the type of partner that I wanted in my life, in my relationship. Understanding these things doesn't just happen for most of us. It takes practice, it takes perseverance, lessons that we learn from the story of Hanuman. We can relate the theme to feelings of self-doubt. As we go through life, life is complicated. We all have doubts about ourselves, about our abilities, about who we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to be doing. These are very common issues that all of us are dealing with. The theme is universal. When we set aside our ego and our doubts and devote ourselves to what we want, we often surprise ourselves with an accomplishment that we didn't think was possible. Now, as you read through the Ramayana, you'll discover that Hanuman, he performed some amazing feats that he didn't even know that he was capable of. But when the chips were on the table, when his back was against the wall, when he felt like he had no other options, he trusted himself, he put himself out there, and he came through with some miraculous tasks. I'll save the story. I won't spoil it for you. I actually do want you to read and appreciate the story. But you can think of a great many ways about how you can tie the general theme into the larger teachings of yoga in a way that is universal, so that it's said in a way that is understood regardless of where you are in your practice, where you are in your life. The theme is universal. Next, you can begin to really connect with your students in powerful ways when you personalize the experience. Make yourself relatable. Tell the story from your own perspective, something that happened to you, so that the students can see the world for a moment through your eyes and know that you are a human as well, with your own problems and your own issues. Relate a struggle that you've overcome. For example, you can tell the story of the time that you overcame some obstacle, some challenge, and the practice of Hanumanasana helped teach you and prepare you for this challenge, for this issue that you had to overcome. Relate a benefit that you've received. Remember that time that you accomplished, fill in the blank. And the practice of Hanumanasana helped teach you the skills and provide you the mindset that you needed. You can relate some insight that you've gained. What kind of virtue have you earned through the experience of your practice? And why is that important to you? I like to teach Hanumanasana in a peak pose format, meaning that we will build up to that pose sequentially through class, by doing harder and more difficult variations of the splits pose and adequately preparing the muscle groups that need to be stretched and opened in order to achieve that pose. And when we reach the point in class when everybody has practiced Hanumanasana for the first time, and many students are thinking to themselves, Johnny, what are you making us do? Why are you making me try to do this? Then I usually like to stop the class and bring everybody down to for a moment and talk about the pose in perhaps ways that they hadn't considered before. This is where I personalize the experience. And my story of the pose is that I used to never believe that I could actually do that pose. And in fact, this is what I've said to a teacher before. I will never be able to do Hanumanasana. I will never be able to do that pose because I have guy hips. And I sincerely and genuinely believed that to be true. And so I never practiced that pose with the intention of ever achieving my pelvic floor to the ground in a full splits. I thought it was an impossibility, so I didn't even try to do that. But I practiced the pose because, one, it stretched out my hamstrings, and two, it stretched out the hip flexors, and I knew that those two things were beneficial to my body. And so I practiced the pose just for those things specifically. However, over time, with perseverance, with dedication, with devotion, lo and behold, one day I was practicing the pose and my pelvic floor reached the ground. Now, I was sincerely amazed and surprised as I was convinced that that was never a possibility for me. But it happened with time, with effort, with perseverance, with dedication, with devotion. And in the same way, if you would have asked me when I first became a yoga teacher, when I completed my 200-hour teacher training, if you had asked me then if I would have ever lived on a tropical island for 4.5 years teaching teacher trainings, if you would have asked me if I would have taught over 20 teacher trainings of a syllabus of a program that I created, if I would have traveled the world teaching yoga, I would have told you that you're crazy. I would have thought the idea itself was crazy. It didn't even seem possible. But just like the practice of Hanumanasana, when you are persistent, when you are dedicated, and when you are devoted, you do the work not for the goal, not for the end result, but because you enjoy it, you want to do it. It's what gives you purpose. It's what gives you passion. And when you consistently do these things over a period of time, I promise you that one day you will look around and you will be absolutely amazed at where you've wound up, of what you've accomplished, that you were able to do the splits, that you were able to lead teacher trainings, that you were able to become a full-time yoga teacher, that you were able to achieve dreams that you never thought possible before. These are things that we learn directly from the practice. And when you can tie these lessons to the experience of the practice, to your students, and to the pose, the class becomes extremely powerful, extremely magical, and your teaching skill, your teaching ability elevates significantly. The last aspect of this theme building formula is Physicalize. Connect the theme to the asana and the experience. And you can kind of see that there is some overlap, some interplay between all of these aspects, and that's okay. In Physicalize, you want to relate to an action. So in one mighty leap, Hanuman jumped over the sea to Sri Lanka. Now you can picture his jump in midair. You know, if you think about someone, an Olympic athlete perhaps, getting ready for the long jump. They run towards the line, they step one foot right at the line, and then they stretch the other leg forward in a leap. One leg is stretched forward, the other leg is stretched back, and the arms are up in the air. You can see the resemblance of the pose Hanumanasana and the mighty leap. And so the story itself resembles the pose. It's physicalized. You can relate the pose to a quality. You know, there was a moment in the story where Hanuman was unable to find Sita, and he felt like he had failed Rama. So he returned empty-handed. He was humbled, and he learned the quality of humility, which probably is one of the most lacking qualities in our modern world. We could all do to learn a little bit more humility, to be more humbled to ourselves and to each other. Practicing this pose brings us humility because it's not easily accessible for most of us. We learn and come up against our limitations. We can relate the pose to an experience. Hanuman respected Rama so much that he found joy in being of service to him, just as it's a joy to experience life and vitality as you stretch and move on your mat. You know, for me, feeling my body move on my mat, performing poses that require strength, that require flexibility, that require persistence, these things make me feel good. These things make me feel alive. And even though I don't always do exactly what I hope that I can do, I do appreciate that I do have some health and some vitality to move my body, to use my body, to get on my mat. I feel an appreciation for life when I am able to practice these things. Now, for this video, we've been primarily using Hanuman as an example, as a context with which to talk about these aspects of this theme building formula. But I also want to give you a few other considerations also. Chakras are wildly popular classes to teach. They're interesting, they're intriguing, they're mystical, they're magical. You have a lot of opportunity to teach themes through chakras also. In the case of Hanuman, it's a splits pose. Hanumanasana is a splits pose. And splits poses activate the second chakra, Svadhisthana. So you could theme your class around Svadhisthana, you could theme the class around Hanuman, but essentially teach the same series of poses. You can theme with the use of metaphor. Now, I used some of this as I personalized my experience of Hanumanasana. But essentially, you relate how the struggle for the pose relates to the struggle of goals, of finding balance in life, etc. For example, if you were teaching a class with balance poses, you could really theme a lot about finding balance in life. You were so caught up between duties and responsibilities, yet desires and wishes are sometimes in conflict with our duties and our responsibilities. So how do we find a balance to these things? There is an unlimited potential of opportunities to find the use of metaphor as we relate the work of our practice to the work and the challenges and difficulties of our lives. And a really interesting possibility for theming is to imply the theme. Don't feel that you have to explain everything all the time to all of your students. With an implied theme, you might not even actually express the idea of it, but perhaps you created the class with the thought of it in your mind. So perhaps you created the sequence, perhaps the feelings, the emotions, the thoughts that you want your students to experience are considered by you as you put your class together. And this can have a profound effect on how the class ultimately comes together and how you teach it also. Of course, I have some action steps for you. I want you to make a plan. So just as I hope that you sit down and plan out your asana classes, thinking about the transitions, thinking about the poses that you want to include, as you think about how you're going to work up to this pose or that pose, or how you're going to set the mood of your class, or perhaps you want to set an intention, or all of the things that you do as you prepare for your asana class. I want you to practice creating a theme in the same manner. Make a plan. Evaluate the impact that your theme might have on your students' experience of your class. Present your message in a way that allows your student to reflect on your words and apply their meaning through their own experience. And really try to avoid being condescending or avoid telling them how to think. We don't want our students to be told how to think, particularly by us, but allow them to process the information in their own way related to their own experience. And then practice and refine. So you'll recall that the first time that you taught an asana class, you probably had a lot of room for improvement there. And you might still have a lot of room for improvement. And we all do. This is a continual thing. We're always getting better all the time. Even when you've been teaching for years and years, there's room for improvement. But understand that delivering your philosophical message, to deliver these interesting stories, to weave these things into your classes, that it's going to take practice, and that you won't always say what you meant to say, and it won't come out the way that you intended it to. And there will be times when you have to refine this, and you won't know that this is the case until you get out there and you do it. And in this way, it's really helpful to teach these classes over and over again. Not every day, not every week, but over time. You might teach this class every couple of weeks. And each time that you bring this class out, you will improve your delivery of the theme, your timing of the theme, the poignancy, the impact that it has will improve as you teach this class over and over again. Lastly, I know that I've given you a lot of information in this video, a lot to process and a lot to think about. And perhaps you're even thinking, what am I going to do with all this information? Where do I begin? And how do I figure out what I'm going to teach and how I'm going to theme it? So here's a few steps that you can follow, and I think it might set you on the right path. So first of all, write about a challenge that you've had in your life in the past year. It might take a few moments for you to sit down and think through all the difficulties, but pick one. Because you're a yoga teacher, because you practice consistently, perhaps your practice helped you to get through this challenge that you've had. So write down some thoughts that you have about that. How did yoga help you to get through your challenge? Then, what was the primary lesson that you learned? And how does the lesson that you learned relate to a philosophical yogic teaching? Just scan through your memory of all of the lessons that you've learned from your teacher trainings, from your practice, from videos that you've watched, from workshops that you've attended. From all of that knowledge up until now, how does any of that relate to this challenge that you're thinking about? Then give some consideration to all of the poses that you know. How does this challenge, how does this theme that you're starting to put together, how does it relate to some key action, outcome, or aspect of an asana pose? And as you sit down and as you work through these steps, I have a strong suspicion that the theme for your next class will start to come together. If you have any questions about any of that, then please reach out to me in our group forums or in our private Facebook group. This may be an online learning process where the video is pre-recorded, but I do want to make this as much of a real student-teacher relationship as possible. And in order to make that happen, there needs to be communication between you and myself. So don't hesitate to ask questions. There is a community of yoga teachers just like you in your shoes who are trying to put these pieces together, and we can all help each other to elevate our teaching, to improve the experience of our students, and enjoy even more this process of teaching. So thank you for sitting through this lesson on how to teach philosophy in your yoga classes. I hope that the information is helpful. I hope it is useful. I hope it is relevant. And I can't wait to look forward to see what the result is. Let me know how you implemented this information and how your class turned out. And I'll see you in the next lesson.